I am delighted to be here and delighted to see your faces, having seen your applications now for a little while. And this is a wonderful, rich group. I'm really pleased and pleased that we're still seeing so much interest and support for sustainability across the curriculum. Your group is the strongest we've ever had in terms of institutional commitment, funding, teams in place of leaders, sustainability councils, sustainability directors. Some schools are still at a beginning stage, but we used to have almost everybody at a beginning stage. And now we have schools that are really moving forward well. So I'm just delighted to see this. I really want to thank Daita and Aishi for all of the help. This workshop used to be in person for 2 days, and it was been sponsored from the beginning by Aishi, and so we really do appreciate that, and glad we're able to at least try to offer something, since we're not in a place where we can do the 2-day intensive in person anymore, but we can at least do this 2 partial days of Zoom, and someday we hope we'll be able to get back to in person. So I've asked, for those of you who've just come in late, I've asked you, if you can, to put in your school so that folks can see the nice diversity and also perhaps discover who's in their region or who's a school similar to theirs. If you want to put your screen on gallery, I'd like to ask a few questions, and maybe if folks can just raise their hands by lifting your hand. So first of all, how many folks are here from a large school, a school of maybe 20,000 or more? Yes, quite a few, thank you. Okay, and then how many of you are here from a medium-sized school, say somewhere between 8,000 or 9,000, at 10,000 and 20,000? Yep, we have a really good contingent of medium-sized schools. And then how many folks are here from a small liberal arts college? Yeah, we have the biggest group from the small liberal arts colleges. Great. Thank you. And then I'd like to ask one last question, which is, how many of you have seen something in the agenda that Daita sent out that you resonated too positively? How many saw something in the agenda you said, oh, good, that's going to be there? I'm just curious. And I'm going to be aware that some of you haven't looked at the agenda, so that's fine too. Okay, let me just look here. Okay, thank you. All right, so as I mentioned, what we used to do was bring a group anywhere from 20 to 40 of you faculty leaders to an institution. And we used to run this, I say we, because it used to be that Jeffrey Chase, my colleague at San Diego State University, and later at Cal State Channel Islands, and I at Emory University would co-lead this train the trainer model. So this is really designed to help faculty who are ready to encourage or support or serve in an across the curriculum sustainability development, faculty development program. How did we did those workshops a total of about 21 times before COVID shut us down. And sometimes we did them in California, sometimes in Atlanta. And I had previously and during that time helped to bring the Ponderosa model to Emory, and we had done the Ponderosa project, the Piedmont project there at Emory for a total of 15 years. So many of the examples that I'm bringing today come from that Emory situation, but both Jeff and I were very privileged to be able to visit a number of other schools and help schools of all different sizes across the country move toward a faculty development program as well. And so what we have learned is that this model works very, very well in a wide range of different kinds of schools, very small schools to very large schools. So I am going to be pretty enthusiastic about the model today, and I can feel no modesty about it because I didn't develop it. I just learned how to do it. Jeff Chase and Paul Rowland and the colleagues at Northern Arizona were the ones who developed the original Ponderosa model. So let me just say a quick word about how did I get here, and then I would like to review the agenda for today. So I had carried out sort of two phases of my own research. I'm an anthropologist, and my specialty is farms and farming and farmer decision making. And I had done some work in Latin America and then in the US. And I was in transition to my third project when I realized that I felt some urgency around sustainability. And so I began to look at what universities can do and got to know Second Nature in Boston. And the leader of Second Nature, Tony Cortese, told me that really the best program to address the knotty problem of how do you get faculty involved was Northern Arizona. So I got in touch with Jeff Chase, who ran it, and he invited me to come out there and participate in the program. That was their fifth and last year. And I was very impressed with the two-day model, and I thought this will work at Emory, even though Northern Arizona is a very large public land grant institution, has a very different mission from a private Research One liberal arts college with professional schools like Emory. But I really thought it would work, and so we brought Jeff to Emory, and we learned how to do it, and then we continued to do it on our own. So my goal today is that you really have the background that you need, the tools that you need, the details about how to use this model and how to adapt it to your school. I'm really focusing on faculty leaders. I recognize that a number of you are sustainability directors, a few of you are provosts and other administrators, and that's great. You can be an important part of this team. But my primary experience is with the sometimes a little bit challenging shift of role that a faculty member goes through when you go from being a teacher of students to being a colleague and mentor to your other colleagues, and how we make that transition in ourselves and help to put on a really compelling program for our peers. So just to say a few guidelines for today, I would like to really invite you to be here. We say that when we have the in-person two-day workshop, we say, please leave your cell phones off. Don't look at your email, just be here for the 2 days. And we're not going to do this for 2 days. We're just going to do it for 2 hours. But I would love it if you would just give all your creativity over to thinking about your school and these ideas from other schools and how it might work. We are going to have a recording, and we will make that available for you. And I'll be doing a brief PowerPoint, and that'll be available to you. And we will have some materials between this session and next session, so that I don't have to do all the talking. You'll be able to read some of it. And then I think we'll have a really rich discussion next time as we begin to put together some options for your school. Let me share my screen quickly and look at the agenda with you. So we've looked at the goals of the workshop, and I want to turn very shortly to the question of how do we engage faculty? That's one of the real challenges here. And then I want to come back to the larger philosophy of the Ponderosa Project, Piedmont Project, all the other programs around the country, how is this different, and how does it reflect a changing role for you and the rhythm of the day? And then I'd like to go through the basic structure of the workshop, giving you some of the tips and experiences and alternatives, things we've tried that didn't work, as well as things that work. How we do introductions and the welcome, how do we define sustainability, how do we bring in resource experts for mini lectures, what kind of breaks and walks we do, what about the learning outcomes exercise, which is a critical component, how we do closure, get commitment to further follow-up activities. And once we've gone through that basic structure, we'll take a break and we'll have some discussion in here somewhere where it seems to fit appropriately. And then I want to turn to the question of, why is this work difficult, and how does it reflect what's been going on in higher education? And then, as time permits, there are altogether in the model 4 what I call didactic components, 4 little pieces that you as a workshop leader would need to master. And we give you handouts or PowerPoint on all of them, but I'm going to try to review them, 2 of them for you today. And then I'm very delighted that Jeff Chase will be able to join us and say a little bit about fostering innovation and gathering momentum on your campus. And we'll close with a review of the issues we've covered today and what's left for next Thursday, and how you might prepare for that. So with that, I'm going to ask Daita to hold on a second while I'm going to ask Daita to put you into trios, small groups of 3, and I'm going to give you 10 minutes, and we'll give you a screen list of the questions, but I'd like you to do 3 things. I'd like you to introduce yourselves so you get to know the 3 of you. Do that, please, briefly, so you have time for the discussion. And the primary issue is, how do we entice in faculty to the program? How do we engage them? What are strategies that either you've thought about or you've actually done, or something you could just imagine, something you think would work on you if you were a faculty member? What are some strategies? And then when you get close to the end of your 10 minutes, if you'd pick one of you to quick do a list, just a short phrase list in the chat. And I'm not going to read the chat today during our workshop because I find it makes me too distracted, but Daita is going to save the chat, and I will read it between this time and next time and create us a master list of strategies. So we will put this together and we'll have a chance to talk more about it next time. Okay, are there any questions about that? So introductions, strategies to engage faculty, to bring them in, and then a quick list into the chat. And then and one thing I did want to say, if at any time your small group isn't working, the other folks aren't there, or some problem with it, just opt out, come back here into the main room, and Daita will reassign you. Yes, Blair, did you have your hand up? Did you want to ask a question? No, okay. Oh, I'm sorry, it was my hand on yours. Okay, Daita, could you please go ahead and send us into small groups?
Yes.
Thank you. Take a few minutes. Was there something that came up in your small group that surprised you, something you really hadn't thought about, something that you really liked? You want to raise your hand and I can call on you? Something that came up in your small group that you were really surprised at and really liked? Yes, Lauren, do you want to unmute? And
Hi, everybody. Thanks. I think the focus on intersectionality was really big in our group and really exciting. Finding strategies that show the importance and relevance of sustainability in all disciplines needs to be like a really important first step in addressing curriculum. Ensuring that faculty feel like this matters to them is part of making it successful.
Great, very good point. Any others that stood out for you? Yes, Blair, want to unmute?
So one thing that came up for us was really the idea of the same thing for students, is providing food and drinks to bake people in, and I think really having cross-disciplinary conversation, where you could really exchange ideas and get different people's perspectives in an environment that's comfortable, relaxing, and frequent enough, I guess, to maintain conversation and to have some objectives to be working toward.
Very good. Yep. Very good. Thank you. Anyone else? These look like really interesting things in the chat. Yes, Garrett.
Sure. Hi, everybody. So we discussed the food as well, but I think that's sort of symbolic of there needs to be, and I'm seeing this in the chat as well, right? Like the question I think to start with is, what are faculty getting out of this engagement, and how do we make that sort of value proposition clear? And I think there's just a lot of pressure and stress on junior faculty in particular, to make sure that their time is being used really productively and effectively. And I think especially over the last couple of years, we've all sat through many webinars and things like that aren't always the most productive use of our time, and aren't particularly participatory and those sorts of things. And so I think just making it clear, how do folks really, what are they going to get out of this, especially for junior faculty? Can this help promote their professional development, their tenure file, those sorts of things, as well as for non-tenure track faculty, why is it worth their precious time? So really making that value proposition clear is what we discussed a lot of.
Wonderful, wonderful. That really sets me up. Thank you, all of you. And I can see there's many more of these similar useful thoughts. I'm going to go right ahead because what you said, all three of you, what you said really fits in to the philosophy that was developed, that we adopted in the Piedmont Project. So the fundamental beginning point of the philosophy is that the faculty own the curriculum. The faculty are the ones responsible for it. And so each faculty member really knows what it is that they are trying to accomplish in their department, in their program, with their particular group of students, given their background and interests. And so we start out by saying, you are the experts. You are the experts. You are the ones who know what it is that you're trying to accomplish in your class. And we are up here to give you some ideas, but you are the ones who will ultimately decide. And I think that's an important message, because the tendency, I think, on the part of many workshops is to be a download of knowledge. Let me tell you what it is you need to know. Here it is, death by PowerPoint. And what the Piedmont Ponderosa Project philosophy is that the birthright of the academy is the opportunity for faculty to come together and think together, not only about teaching, but about important problems. And that we often, because of the way our universities are today, and even on small colleges, don't get a lot of time to just come together and talk and let alone be supportive of each other. So this isn't just about information. It is about creating a group of people who can be resources for each other and who create a momentum together. So what I'm trying to do as a resource leader, as a workshop leader, is not only give them something useful that they go forward with to change their courses, but build them into a community that's behind sustainability, so that other things that we want to do on campus will have faculty support, and that maybe they'll be sending their students for internships, they'll be helping various kinds of campus efforts. That larger cultural transition is a deeper change. And so we have to create space for that. And how do we do that? We do that first by making sure that the workshop is a safe space for people. And then we do that secondly by making it as interesting as possible and fun and different dimensions of it. So it's going to have to be supported in various ways. One of the things that I like to do when we first get people into the room is to make sure they have a name tag. Not that they have printed out where you can't read it, but I have made sure the staff person is printed out with big letters that can be read by anyone of any age. And so that it really says their name in a way that's easy to learn. You know, that's a subtle thing, but it lowers the tension around learning 20 new names or 40 new names or however many you have in your workshop. And we also give people the agenda and a list of participants. So they walk in the door, and as we do introductions and get to know each other, they can keep monitoring that list. It just makes it easier to feel at home with this group. These are subtle things. They're not absolutely necessary, but I think they make a difference. So we do things to create a supportive, safe space. We also are making it really clear what you do over the course of the 2 days involves all different kinds of fields, so that you're showing respect, not just for the natural sciences or ecology, but for a wide range of contributions, because all the fields are necessary. It needs everybody. Because what we're about here is a major cultural transition. You know, we're living a life here in the US that requires 4 planet Earths to support if we were to have everyone live this way. So we know that we have to make changes. How do we begin to build that really dramatic cultural shift? So one of the principles that Jeff Chase developed at Northern Arizona is trying to pamper the faculty a little bit. The Piedmont Project and Ponderosa always were held after graduation, but really before the summer got started. And I have found that for Emory, it really works the best. Graduation for us is always on a Monday. Tuesday is always a day of meetings, and sometimes Wednesday. So we do our Thursday and Friday of that week. And I have found that if I were to try to do it the following week, a lot of people who want to participate are already gone. They plan vacations, go to conferences. And so it's really good to put it right there, even though people are tired. So the pampering is particularly important. And one thing that Jeff did in the Ponderosa project was that the night before the workshop, so that would be Wednesday night, he would bring faculty to a museum on the edge of town that had a beautiful garden and a lovely reception space. And he would just have a pretty simple wine and cheese reception. And people would come together and spend an hour and a half, maybe a little bit more, getting to know each other, having a little something to eat. And he would ask them to introduce themselves to each other, and what project they were going to do in terms of changing a course. But otherwise, he said, I'm not going to have you work tonight. I just want you to have a chance to get to know each other. And he found that socializing and an opportunity to see, schmooze a bit, was really important in making the other 2 days go well. So when we brought the program to Emory, we had enough money in the early days to have faculty get together for a dinner. And again, we would have people introduce each other. And if we didn't have a good table set up, we would move people around between the main course and dessert. And we would just let the social interactions begin. And later on, when we didn't have as much money, we used a house of a faculty member and got some catering. Sometimes schools I have seen have done a potluck or had that dinner in the school cafeteria for a very modest sum of money. But giving faculty a chance to come together first in a little bit of pampering, a little bit of social time was very productive. Now, in later years, we canceled that and we felt pretty successful without it, but I do think it was a great example of the principle. So what is your job? I think sometimes faculty leaders feel nervous because they say, I don't know enough to help somebody in chemistry or somebody in sociology. That's not my field. I don't really understand English teachers or medical school curricula. And I think the important thing is that it's not your job to have the answers of what they put in their classes. That is really their job. They're the ones with the PhD. Your job is to get them there, make them feel comfortable, and set the table with a rich variety of activities and intellectual stimulation. So this is a way of providing, hopefully in the 2 days, at least something for everybody to get excited about. Because your goal is to stimulate their imagination. Now, most of them will come in with an idea about how they want to change their course. And some of the comments that are made at the very end of the workshop, when we circle up and kind of reflect on the day, some of the comments that make me the happiest are the ones where they say, I came in thinking I would teach about gardens in my Spanish course on Spain, and now I realize I need to completely change what I'm doing. I need to really look at the whole concept of the natural environment and how it's different in different cultures, and how we don't even have a word in Spanish for the natural environment. And, and this intellectual breadth, far beyond where they started, that's the goal. And then they have their own momentum to spend the rest of the summer researching, preparing, thinking about the changes they might make in their courses, in their laboratories, whatever it is. And then in the Piedmont project, we always would come back together at the end of the summer for a half day in which people would report back on what they had found, and we would have a lunch together. I think it's important for us as leaders to recognize that adding sustainability issues into people's courses can make some faculty quite nervous. It's scary. We're going into directions we haven't been trained in. Nobody we know in our home institutions ever talked about this. So how am I supposed to integrate sustainability into my math class, my Russian class? We're really treading new ground, and that makes many faculty very uncomfortable. They want to be the expert before they go into that classroom, and you're asking them to be somewhat naive in a new area, and that's scary. So again, being supportive, I think it's helpful if we model. I don't have all the answers. And if we also help people see that sometimes they don't need the answer, sometimes they could say to the students, I don't know the answer to that, let's figure it out. Or who can go get that answer? Sometimes the students can get the answer faster than the faculty member can. So I think modeling a little bit of how we are, if you I'm sure familiar with the expression, we have to build the bridge as we walk it. That's part of the Piedmont Project philosophy, is that we encourage faculty to feel comfortable doing that. So they are moving outside their comfort zone. That's part of why we're creating a safe space, laying the table with a delicious smorgasbord of intellectual treats, provide them some colleagues who will help. We try to do things all day long that nurture that relationship. And it's okay not to have all of the answers. So that's kind of a once over lightly of the philosophy behind the Piedmont Project model. And what I'd like to do now is share my screen again. And let's look a little more closely . All right, it's not advancing. Why is it not advancing? Here we go. But I don't think I read, that I want to say that I have spent my academic career mainly at Emory University in Atlanta. So almost all my examples come from Atlanta. But I have just this year moved to Washington, D.C., and I want to acknowledge that I now live and work on lands that were traditional territories for the Nacotchtank, Anacostan, and the Piscataway peoples. So let's look at the, I'm just going to move my screen a little bit here. Let's look at and go in a little more detail at how we can understand this model. And I had suggested to a number of you that you might want to print it out and you can follow over. So I've said a word about Wednesday evening might be a dinner, and there are various ways to do it that are low cost and not so low cost. Gathering with coffee and tea, and we have experimented with whether we provide a breakfast or not, and I think people need to eat at home and get exactly what they want, so we tend to go light on that. When we're doing the Piedmont Project for graduate students, that's a little different, so we usually do have bagels and peanut butter and maybe granola and something a little more substantive to start off the day. People get their name tags, and one of the things I like to do as people are coming in is to go over to them and actually shake hands and say, I'm glad you're here and thanks for coming. And I think a number of times people are sort of startled. I think they expect it to be audience, and you're signaling by doing that that you're looking for more than just passive sitting there. We do some welcome activities, and I'll say a little bit more about them next time, but the next really important component of welcoming is giving them a little bit of a sense of who you are. One of the things that I was taught early on when I was learning how to do workshops is people can't hear you unless they know who you are. And that made me realize, oh, all these years I have always heard speakers do a little biography, autobiography at the beginning. I never really knew why that was. And now I understand it's because they need to know a little bit of where I'm coming from. And then I think it's really important that people have a chance to speak before we do too much. And I am really sorry in a way, though of course I'm not sorry at all, that we have such a great group of almost 60 people. We have 68 people here. So I couldn't do that, but I would, if we were in person, we would make the time so that everybody gets to say hello and say where they're from, what department they're in, and name their project. And I tell the participants, as we go around the room, pay attention to who's in a field very different from yours and who's in a field very similar to yours, because I'm going to ask you to do various things with people in those different ways. And so that gives them something to listen for, so they're not just tuning out while other people introduce themselves. I think it's really important for everybody in the room to hear their voice in the room. And I think it makes it much more likely that shyer people are going to talk later if you have that moment where they are constrained to talk by introducing themselves. So I really encourage you, even if we end up spending 20 minutes doing that, which we sometimes do, it's a good investment. And then we turn to the issue of what is sustainability. And this is the first didactic piece where I, as the leader, or whoever's doing the leadership, gives a sort of definitions mini lecture. Not long, 10 to 15 minutes, but it really does help for academics to define our terms. You know, we are people of the nitpick, and so we are really interested in that. And I will share that with you later on, how one way to do that you can see whether it works for your school. Then we turn to the first resource person, and picking the resource people is really important. And we usually start with somebody from the natural sciences. And in this case, we have an expert from Emory who does icebergs. And I was just amazed to learn that when those amazing pictures that we see of iceberg sections crashing into the ocean, that calving of an iceberg is the equivalent force of a nuclear bomb. And so obviously there's some interesting physics going on there. So Justin gives a once over lightly on climate change so that even faculty who feel pretty insecure about the science of that can feel a little more comfortable. But it's mainly about his work and something that's exciting about his work. And you notice that it's a half an hour. It's just a half an hour. Every resource person is supposed to be just a half an hour. And that's one of the primary rules of the Piedmont Ponderosa philosophy, is that's enough. And you're going to run into all kinds of faculty who are absolutely sure that they need more time. And I'm sure more time would have some interest, but a half an hour is enough. And so one thing I would urge you to do is be very strong, stand up, turn on the lights, do whatever it is you need to do so that it's only a half an hour. So then what you do is you say to the group, pick some people that you don't know and form a small group of 3 or 4 and talk about how does what you just heard from Justin Burton relate to your project, to your course. How could you imagine bringing issues of climate change into your course? And you let the small groups form in the room, and they have a half an hour. So they really have enough time to let everybody talk and begin to really get somewhere. And then you give them a 15-minute break. This is part of the genius of the rhythm, because that gives people time to go to the bathroom, get more coffee, and continue a conversation if they want to, or seek out somebody that they heard that they would like to follow up with. Then the second resource person, we try to pick somebody who's in the social side of sustainability. Sandra Robertson was a very effective speaker. She's from a local nonprofit that works on hunger and social justice, food insecurity issues. And so faculty who are in fields very diverse and away from those kinds of issues can really see, here's somebody who's doing something in the city. Here's how she understands the issues. Here's how she puts economic issues, social issues, environmental issues together. Again, it's a half an hour. Can have a PowerPoint or not, depending. And then in this case, there is almost 45 minutes of small group discussion. And again, I say to people, pick other folks that you don't know and form another small group and talk about how can we use the social in your teaching? How could it connect? And this is harder, I think, especially for people in the natural sciences, engineering, not so much in the humanities, but it can be really useful if the groups are diverse. There can be some very interesting brainstorming. And then we go to lunch. In our case at Emory, we stay in the same room and sandwiches are brought in. And again, if you just let faculty members go pick up their sandwiches, most of them will take it back and sit in the same place they were before and not talk to anybody. So you have to say, okay, get your sandwiches, and it's fine for you to move your chair. It's fine for you to sit anywhere you want to. Try to find some people that you don't know or people you want to talk to. So encourage that movement. So you'll have a lot of bubbling stuff over lunch. And then we have what most people think is the highlight of the Piedmont project, which is the Woods Walk by Eloise Carter. So here's Eloise on the lower right. She's a biologist. She's very enthusiastic. She really understands the Piedmont bioregion. That's why our project is called the Piedmont. And she will lead the group outside and give them an exercise of really smelling, looking, listening to the natural world. As you can see, it's a forest right outside the building where this is located. And then later we walk into the forest. She shows us things about invasive species and about forest preservation. We learn a whole bunch of stuff. And we walk and we get in the sun. And we've had a lot of good luck. We don't usually get rained on. And so that's an example of a woods walk. You can see on the lower right some small groups that are meeting. I'm sorry, on the lower left. On the upper right, lunch. And on the upper left was a resource person who was an ethnomusicologist. And he talked about how in music, there are ways in which the music's author is relating to the natural world and evoking relationships of different kinds with the natural world. And then he brought these instruments from a gamelan orchestra that imitate the different components of a thunderstorm. And he had the faculty actually create the thunderstorm in the room. That was a very dynamic and fun. So those are two resource people and the woods walk. So on the first day in the afternoon, we come back from lunch and the wood walk. We say 15 minutes for announcements. We usually don't actually have announcements. That just gives a little more slop time. So if we run late, we're not late. And if people need to go to the bathroom longer than we thought, you know, that's going to be fine. And then we have what is sometimes a resource person that in this case, it's a video. Howard Frumpkins, a public health professor who used to be at Emory, and then he went off to the CDC and eventually ended up being the dean of the School of Public Health at Washington University or the University of Washington. And he has done a TED Talk called Sprawl and Health. And it's only about 11 minutes. And I'm going to give you the link to this, and I'm going to ask you to please look at it before next time, because it's a great example of a resource person. He's talking about his research, his hobby horse, and yet it's very compelling. It's beautifully done as a talk. It really shows nicely the relationships of parts of sustainability. We give that more than the 11 minutes or so that the video takes, because there's always a lot of discussion afterwards. Then we take a break and we have some snacks. Faculty march on their stomach. I try to do healthy snacks. Try to do things like nuts and fruit, dried fruit, maybe a little bit of banana bread, you know, something that isn't just processed food. And then we have the third resource person, who is Keenet Howitt, the Director of Sustainability. And I think it's really helpful if you have a faculty development program to have the sustainability director speak. She or he can talk about what's going on campus, and there are a lot of opportunities for student engagement or course connection. It's really valuable. And I don't know about your schools, but at Emory, it was always fascinating that most of the faculty didn't know already most of what we were doing on sustainability. So it was pretty exciting to them to learn all this great stuff. And then we have another didactic piece, 9 Ways to Change a Course, which I will share with you later, that helps faculty feel like there are a lot of different things they can do, that it's not so overwhelming. And then we do a reflection exercise. At this point in the day, we have really given faculty a lot. I'm going to stop my share for a minute here, just to make for a change. We have really given them a lot, and you can begin to see their eyes glazing over. And so what I like to do is give a little talk about why taking time out, reflection is important, and then invite them to say, I would like to invite you to spend 20 minutes in silence. Please, you can sit in silence in this room, you can go outside. Usually our Piedmont project is in good weather and there's places to sit outside in the fresh air. Sit outside. If you want to journal, that's fine. If you want to do meditation or prayer, if you need to move, if you need to walk around the building, whatever you need to do that will give you a chance to reflect and put aside the tyranny of the to-do list and really let some of the creativity emerge from what you've heard today. And amazingly enough, most people do actually stay off their email and phones and do manage to spend 20 minutes in silence, even though they might find it difficult, and they come back in such a different place. They are so much calmer. The whole atmosphere in the room changes when they come back. And it's much more peaceful, and we can kind of circle up, talk about what we're going to do next time. It's a very, very different atmosphere. I realize I haven't yet shared with you that I use a Tibetan bowl as my way of signaling the various starts and stops. So when it's time for the small groups to come back together, instead of yelling or turning off the lights, I hit the bowl. And the same thing with the meditation, to come back together, time to stop for lunch or get moving to go for the walk. The bowl is a nicer way to do it, although you may have some other strategy that you prefer, which is fine. But anyway, so when they come back there. So let me just look at the agenda that I handed out for the this piece of the sample agenda. A whole group synthesis is right at the end of day one, where we sometimes just let people comment on what really stands out from today, anything particular they want to comment about. And then I've mentioned here that we sometimes do a book table. And I want to share with you this idea of a book table. It's really quite a cool opportunity for faculty. I say, so go home tonight and bring back tomorrow one book from your field that you think your colleagues should know about. And we set up some long tables. They put the books out on the table. And so when they come early, there's this intellectual feast of books from every imaginable field. And really fun things can happen from a book table. Like the Russian professor that participated one year brought Chekhov. And the theater professor who was also there said, oh, I love Chekhov. And the two of them got to talking about Chekhov. And then they decided that actually they had courses the next semester that were both coordinated enough that they would create a special moment in the course where the two courses would come together and the students would read Chekhov underneath the trees at Emory, because the trees are a big deal for Chekhov. And so they did, and it was a fun activity. I think the students got a kick out of it. And you never know what kind of creative thing like that can emerge. And sometimes people end up finding a textbook that they really like. And then, of course, they take the book home with them at the end of the second day. But then for those who are a little more introverted and they don't want to chat during the coffee break, they can go look at the book table. It provides a rhythm of other things. So I'm going to share my screen again quickly because I want to show you something about rhythm. Well, once again, here we're not. Okay, so here we are, the rhythm. So these in yellow are the moments in the 2 days where people are giving didactic components, that is to say, little mini lectures. And you can see it's a small part. And then here are the times when the group is learning from each other. These are the social interaction times, the small groups, the big group discussions, and so on. So one of the geniuses, I think, of this method is that it teaches us all that we learn as much from each other as from anybody who is officially called a leader. And that creates a community in a really powerful way. Now, I want to just finish very quickly the second day, and then I'd like us to take a break. So we start in the morning again with the coffee, tea, and book table browsing. We do announcements if there are any, a check-in. I think it's really important. Once again, everybody in the room put their voice out. So I just start with somebody at random and say, I'd like you to pick one word to describe how you're feeling today. What's one word that describes how you're feeling today? And you get the whole range, you know, excited, sleepy, bored, you know, the whole range. But it lets people kind of see, okay, here we are, we're all in a different place. And poetry, Jeff Chase is an English professor, and so he's a great believer in poetry. And often he would like to start a workshop by reading a poem. And so often in the first day, if there is somebody from the humanities that I think would be interested, I go up to them privately and I say, would you be interested in sharing a short poem that might be relevant to sustainability? They almost always are thrilled. Sometimes I ask in the right at the end when we're reviewing what's the next day, I can even ask somebody there. Now this next exercise comes from Jean McGregor in the curriculum for the bioregion in the Northwest coast of the US. And she developed this. Her experience is that each field has some big ideas, one or two that are central to the field, and that those big ideas actually relate well to sustainability. So if we're going to do this between 9:30 and 10, I usually tell the people the night before, think about what's the big idea in your field. And then I just have people get together in pairs and talk about how does sustainability relate to the big idea in your field. It was really a big insight to me when I discovered that, really the big idea in anthropology is culture. That's our big contribution, you know, that there is such a thing as culture and that it varies and that cultures are adaptive, and helping all of us learn to appreciate that there are other ways of living on the earth, and that some of those other ways or older ways are going to have answers for us as we struggle with sustainability dilemmas. So that would be the once over lightly version for my field. And then we have found it useful sometimes to have a little segment about engaging with Atlanta. Emory has had at different times different kinds of community service opportunities, community partner opportunities, grants. And so we sometimes want a little time for people to think about how do they put that into their course or into their preparation for their course. And then we take a break. And then we do the learning outcomes exercise. And this involves an overview of higher education, which I'd like to do after our break, and a little bit of explanation of what this exercise is. Then I'll do more about that. And there's a whole description of this in your packet that I'll be giving you as the leaders packet. So I'll say more about this. And the learning outcomes exercise is a very significant small group exercise in which we give people a flip chart. We divide them up. You can have even 5 or 6 in a group, so you don't have to have a lot of groups, but the groups work hard, and sometimes it's easier for them to work in groups of 4 or 5, and they have to come up with outcomes on a list, and then they report back to the whole group, and the group assesses and thinks about what did we just learn from this. So it's a major component, and it's a really important transition. So what's happening here is that you start out your definitions of sustainability. Here's a bunch of resource people, a lot of ideas, some reflection. Here's some more ideas, more reflection. And all of it has been up until this point. Here's how you as a faculty member change your course. And in this exercise, we shift our perspective to what is the curriculum? What are we doing as faculty members as a whole, as an institution as a whole? How do we assess whether we're getting there in terms of what we should be doing? And I think that's a really significant shift. And for some people, it's the first time they've ever thought like that. So we do that exercises, the groups report, and then we have another lunch. And sometimes in the second day lunch, the group's really dynamic and it's good to just leave them alone. But sometimes some things have come up that particular people want to talk more about in depth, but I know that the rest of the group doesn't really want to talk about that. Like something like general education requirements, which is a hot issue for some people, but for the professional school faculty who don't teach undergraduates, that's not going to be relevant. So we'll use the lunch to maybe have some self-organizing groups. And if there's a group that wants to talk about food or recycling on campus or something that they want to incorporate into their teaching, we can have those groups break out over lunch. And then we're lucky that we can have Eloise Carter come back and do another walk. But sometimes we've had bad weather and we've canceled this, and we just let people talk for a little longer over lunch and a little sooner. It doesn't ruin things not to have the second walk, but it is really good to have these outdoor experiences. It helps cope with the after lunch blahs, and most faculty at Emory are not from Atlanta. Now, I know that's going to be different for different schools, but most faculty are from all kinds of different places, including many from other countries. And they come to Emory, and Emory, Atlanta is kind of sprawled, and so they don't necessarily live in the city of Atlanta. And having a chance to really get grounded in place, to learn about the creek system, the challenges of water in Atlanta, to learn about old growth forests, beech, oak, hickory forests, to learn about the efforts on campus to preserve our forests. All of these things are really powerful for some faculty. And I think the idea of grounding in place and being very place focused is a really valuable component of the Piedmont Project and the Ponderosa Project. So however it makes sense to do it, that I think is useful. And then we come back together and circle up. And you can see the circle here at the bottom. It is really important to make a shift in the arrangement of the room, move the tables out, and have people go around and say what stands out for them in the day. And this allows a really valuable public acknowledgement of some internal processes. And people say some very, very moving things about what they've learned or what they're going to change in terms of teaching, or what they want to think about, what they want to learn more about. And it's, I think, for the faculty who maybe didn't have the greatest experience, it lets them see that other people have. So I think that's really, really useful. We talk about what's coming next, and we do a field trip in August. I'll talk more about that next time. And we're going to have a report back lunch then. And we have to talk about what kind of reward they get, namely they get a stipend, and what they have to do to get it. And again, I'll talk more about that. And at 4 o'clock, we adjourn across the street to an Emory Hotel where there is a bar. And we just say everyone's welcome to have a drink. And it's interesting to me that this is optional. Nobody has to go. About half the people usually go, and about half of them just have orange juice or Coke or something. So it's not a heavy alcohol time, but it is a social time. And that's where, again, more exciting things happen, where the Portuguese professor gets to talking to the anthropologist, and they both decide they want to teach a joint course on the Amazon or some amazing thing. All right, I've talked enough. Let's take a 10-minute break. I'm going to stop my share. Let's take a 10-minute break. And it's 1:15 by my time. So we'll come back in 10 minutes and see where we are at that point. Jeff is also enjoying the wonders of retirement, but is still very connected to helping schools move towards sustainability across the curriculum. So with that, Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Peggy. And let me begin by saying, first of all, I read through the list of everybody who's signed up for this, and I'm really impressed with the range of institutions and the number of you that are engaged in this. It's really very exciting. So thank you for doing this and for being part of this. Really appreciate it. I also want to apologize if I have a little bit of a raspy voice. As you know, that's been going around, and I have a glass of water here so I can keep myself hydrated. So I don't know all that Peggy has shared with you about my background, but I helped initiate the Ponderosa Project at Northern Arizona University in 1995. And over the next 6 years, and this goes to one of the questions that was asked, faculty members modified somewhere between 120 and 130 courses. And I knew that it really made a difference at one point, because I was talking to a senior in 1999, I think, or 2000. And he said to me, "Why is every course here about the environment?" And I knew then we had made a significant dent. One of the questions that I was asked a number of times after initiating the Ponderosa Project was, I was asked this very explicitly at a conference once: is it better to integrate sustainability across the curriculum or to create a sustainability major? To which my answer was yes. So both are important. But what I'd like to focus on today a little bit is the sustainability across the curriculum as opposed to a specific major. And I know that Peggy has probably already covered this with you, or she will cover it. But one of the things that I adopted as a premise very early on was that I am not the expert in the room. My background is American and British literature. I directed an English composition program. I never assumed it was my place to tell somebody in another discipline what they should do with their course. So one of my underlying premises has always been that the experts in the room are the faculty who come to the workshop, regardless of their background, regardless of where they're from, and regardless of what they plan to do. I'll tell you a couple of quick stories that underscore another realization for me, and that was faculty always came up with better ideas than I could have. We had a faculty member, for example, at Northern Arizona, who taught a course in medieval art history. And she called me up and she said, "You know, I'd like to go to the workshop, but medieval art history doesn't have anything to do with the environment or sustainability. I mean, it's like 1,000 years ago. Do you think I should attend? And I said, sure, attend, see how it goes. So she came to the workshop and she talked, she listened to some of our resource experts, and she talked to her colleagues across the campus. There were about 22 people there that year. And at the end of the at the end of the 2-day workshop, which was in May, she left and said, well, I'll do some research over the summer and see what I come up with. Well, she did some research and she found out that one of the largest deforestations that ever took place in Europe took place in the Middle Ages. And it took place in part because of all the construction that was being done to for the cathedrals, the stained glass windows, and all of that incredible architecture. And so she began to ask herself a question. And when we asked her how she changed her course, she said, what I've done with the course is I've said to the students right up front, there's an underlying question, and that is, what is the connection between art, faith, and the environment? And this is an intro course. This was not a course for majors. This was like a 100 level course. And over the course of the semester, she taught students about medieval art and architecture. But she kept coming back to, so what's this connection? What's this connection? And for her final paper that she had all her students do, she said, find a place of worship in Flagstaff, Arizona. It can be a Catholic church, it can be a synagogue, it can be a temple, it can be a Quaker meeting room, it can be a Native American gathering spot, and write a paper about what you think is the connection between art, faith, and the environment, given what you've learned about medieval architecture and art. And frankly, that blew us away, because we thought none of us leading the workshop, or none of us going into the workshop, assumed that she would be able to so imaginatively integrate sustainability into a course like that. So one of the things that I was constantly amazed with is the changes that people made that I didn't predict. And I think one of the core principles about these workshops is the faculty are incredibly creative. We had another faculty member there who taught an intro to archaeology course. And I won't go into a lot of detail, but it was an intro course. And he had students begin to think about, why are archaeological things no longer current? Why are they in the past? What happened in the environment? But the thing that he changed that surprised us the most was that this was a three-hour course. It was 3 lectures a week. And he decided that he was going to change the pedagogy so that he would lecture only 2 days a week. And on the 3rd day, he was going to break students into small groups and give them challenges to deal with around archaeology and the environment. Because he said, if they're going to learn to change the world, they have to work together. And that's another thing that we never would have predicted. I'm going to give you one more example. And Peggy, you can cut me off when I've gone too long, so you can tell me when I need to stop. That is a little bit more recent in my history. We had a faculty member who taught anthropology at San Diego State University, where I was for 14 years after leaving Northern Arizona. And she worked with one of the local communities, National City, which is South Bay, San Diego. And it is right on the harbor. And it's a very relatively small community. But she worked with them, and they gave her a challenge. And they said, we're trying to figure out what to do with the Bayfront. It is not in the shape we want it to be in. And so she gathered materials and challenges from them. She met with them, she talked to them. And then she brought those challenges back, and she divided her they were all seniors, they were all majors, into small groups. and said to each group, okay, here's the challenge. I want you to come up with a presentation of what you think should happen to the Bayfront in National City. The students worked on it over the course of the semester, and toward the end of the semester, she said, wow, they've come up with some amazing solutions. And one of the teams was invited to the city council meeting in National City, where the mayor was there, the city council members were there. And I went down and watched these students present. And I was sitting behind the port commissioner for National City. And at one point, I could hear him turn to one of his colleagues and say, we just paid a consultant $50,000 and we didn't get work this good. And the students kept coming back and saying, you should redefine this, you should redefine that. And at one point they said, this area really needs to be turned into a park and a place where people can gather. And one of the city council members said, well, yeah, that's a great idea, but that's zoned industrial. And the student said, it shouldn't be. And that's something a consultant can't say, but the students can. And another group of students in National City that year working on another project designed a new pedestrian walkway for the downtown area, which the city eventually developed and built. So it's also those hands-on experiences as well. So I think what I would reinforce that I'm sure Peggy has talked about is that, I may go into a discussion about sustainability in a particular discipline and think, I wish this nursing faculty member would do this, or I wish this faculty member would do this. But if I stepped back, what the faculty members came up with was always more insightful and more imaginative and fundamentally more life-changing than I expected. And Peggy knows I can give you one example after another. So I am going to just tell one more example and then I'll stop. So this was a colleague of Peggy's at Emory University who taught a course in Mandarin. And she thought, how am I going to introduce sustainability into a course on Mandarin? I mean, the idea is to teach the language. It's not to teach about the environment. So what she did is she asked students to take a brochure that had been written in English about the environment of the Emory campus and translate it into Mandarin. And there again, it's something that I never would have predicted, never would have seen coming. So I just think that, giving faculty that free rein to explore and to come up with things is really key to these workshops. And so I can stop there. I can answer questions. I do have one more little closing thing, Peggy, but I'll just stop there. I don't know how long you want me to talk. So.
Well, this is wonderful. And I want to share you this slide of that Mandarin pamphlet. So I'll do that in a minute. But that particular faculty member got much improved course evaluations as a result of changing how she taught Chinese. So there's a reason why some people get excited about it. And that was true also for the chemistry teacher who taught Chemistry 101 from the point of view of climate change. So course evaluations really can go up. And then she got so excited about it, she figured out how to do intro Chinese, more advanced. She ended up with a sequence of 3 or 4 courses. And then she ended up being asked to give a presentation at her professional meeting to other scholars. And then she ended up being asked to write about it for the publication that was teaching Chinese. And so all of that ended up being professionally a big boost to her visibility, her department's visibility. And of course, a whole lot of people around the country then saw how to use sustainability content in teaching basic Chinese. So it's a great example, Jeff. Are there any comments or questions? And yes, Eric from Brown.
Thanks so much, Peggy and Jeff. I'm interested in a lot of instances, when what I was thinking about, what I've seen in other places, kind of thinking about infusing across the curriculum with a set of shared learning outcomes that courses kind of organize around. But what I'm hearing from both of you is kind of this suggestion that, in fact, that impedes people being able to like find a connection, a way to connect their course to the theme of sustainability. And so, you know, I'm wondering, when you start to think a little bit administratively about how you make something like this a curricular reality, are there other strategies than, hey, here are a set of learning outcomes, if your course does this thing, you would be part of a curriculum on sustainability? Is there another approach that you've come across, or is the Piedmont Ponderosa model saying we don't really need to use a curricular format? I don't know, this was just emerged to me listening to both of you recently.
Oh, I love these easy questions. Jeff, do you want to take that, or?
Now, I'll respond and then I'll pass it to you. You know, some institutions have used United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and what they've tried to do is sort of map the outcomes that faculty members develop in relation to those SDGs. I mean, some institutions have done that and have found that useful. I think other institutions and other faculty find it a little too restricting. So I think it's one of those things that you're going to have to gauge. I also think that, you know, part of it is thinking about, and I wish I had a diagram I could share with you right now, but part of it is thinking about, you know, sustainability being a mix of outcomes. It's not just one outcome or two or three. I'll give you, I don't know, do I have time, Peggy, for one more example?
Oh, very short, very short.
Very short. Okay, imagine that you take 10 students from Brown University. They're all seniors. They're all in different majors. 2 of them are studying abroad. And you say to them, the course you're going to take together this semester is a course in which you're going to try to solve a problem that is happening with, let's say, something in Rhode Island. I'm not sure what it would be. And at the end of the semester, you're going to make a presentation to what in effect is the city council, or, you know, whatever. So part of what you're looking at there is their ability to communicate with each other, their ability to draw on information that they can trust, their ability to work online together, their ability to write, to make presentations. So part of it is it's sort of general education morphed into a relationship to solving a community problem. And that goes back to John Dewey, of course, but it's, you know, that in itself, if students can do those things, they're more likely to affect those kinds of changes throughout their careers.
Yeah, I think there is something to really be gained with a common denominator like learning outcomes, or I particularly personally like the 6 competencies that Arizona State developed, and I am a little sad that now I understand there's 7 or 8 and they're much more complicated. And when they were just 6, I could keep them in my head and learn them. But I have found that when I introduce them to other faculty, some people love them and some people just are not interested at all, or even are resistant. So I think we are so diverse. Isn't surprising. We're hired because we teach different things. We're supposed to be really different personalities and types of people. And so it's natural that we don't all line up around the same things. So my own feeling is go ahead and give them that, but don't say that's the only way. It's not my way or the highway. Let's have another route or two to, thank you, Daita, for the competencies approach. So you'll have that available, and Daita will be saving the chat for all of us. So for those of us who don't read the chat while we're also trying to pay attention. Thank you, Jeff. This was wonderful. Rich, I so appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Any last word you want to say? No, okay.
You were asking me or somebody else?
No, you, Jeff.
Oh, yeah. Can I read a quick poem?
Oh, yes, indeed.
So this is a poem that Peggy and that I share at a lot of our workshops. It's very short. It's by Jane Hirschfield. It's called Optimism. More and more, I have come to admire resilience, not the simple resistance of a pillow whose foam returns over and over again to the same shape, but the sinuous tenacity of a tree finding the light newly blocked on one side, it turns in another. A blind intelligence, true, but out of such persistence arose turtles, rivers, mitochondria, figs, all this resinous, unretractable earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much. Delightful. And I'm sorry we can't be together the whole time, but Jeff is off in another school, helping them next week. So I would like to just take a few moments, once again, share my screen. I'm going to run through, yes, here, whoops, no. And just very quickly, he gave you great examples of the 9 ways to change your course. So I'm just going to share with you really quickly. So the description of the Chinese language, where the vocabulary, grammar, etc., stays the same, the content changes. That's the hidden curriculum. And the example I often like to use about this is that when we were growing up, when we learned arithmetic, our hidden curriculum was a lot of stuff about transportation for most of us. You know, the train leaves the station and how many miles does it go, or what fraction of if it goes faster. And so we could change that to Peggy carpools and how many miles does that save? How much gas does that save? So that's the hidden curriculum. And for a lot of fields, this is a great way to integrate sustainability. At Emory, there's a required senior course for statistics. That's a very sophisticated presentation of results and analysis. And for their data, they're now using the STARS requirement of the sustainability survey from students, and they're analyzing those data and making these great charts and graphs and showing what's really going on in terms of our students. So new readings, obvious kind of thing. A new assignment, an example of a new assignment is in the business school. One of the faculty members asked the students to, I'm sorry, I'm going to switch and use the example from the nursing school. The nursing schools gave the assignment for the students to analyze the pros and cons of breastfeeding versus bottle feeding. And it was a course on lactation, and they, of course, had a health knowledge that breastfeeding was better, but they hadn't thought about the mountain of plastic bottles or cans that were generated from the waste of bottle feeding. They hadn't thought about the problems of clean water in a lot of places, and the whole cost of manufacturing bottles, transporting bottles, cans of formula, and so on. Not to mention airlifting formula. So the environmental costs of these two could be something that the nursing students would learn about, and then they might be able to help their patients. An example of a new unit or a new module in our political science department, there was a faculty member who had a course on rights, and he just added a module on environmental rights. He was already doing a number of other in the history of rights language. And then later on, he added right to food. And so left the rest of the course the same. The student project was the business school. The students had to go create behavior change using the theories in the business school. And they just did some amazing things. And one student was really interested in lowering the pesticide use on golf courses and figured out a strategy to promote that. And then one of the great things about the Piedmont Project is that they meet each other and can begin to use each other as guest speakers. So where somebody feels insecure, we often can help them find somebody to take over that part of the course. And of course, a new course, but the paradigm shift that we saw with that great art example, where instead of just teaching the history of art, she's asking for an analysis of the relationship of religion, art, and the environment. And that was a whole paradigm shift for her and what she was doing in the class. There was a paradigm shift again in the business school at Emory, where a faculty member said, I'm just going to make an assessment of sustainability be kind of the background to everything we do in the course. And then, of course, engaged learning and community experience. Don't worry about copying this. This will be in your packet. But this shows you what the Mandarin or I'm not sure if this, there are several different Chinese calligraphies, and this was taken from the website. They would take a part of the Emory website and translate it into a brochure. So I want to right now, as we're nearing the end, just take quick stock. So let's look at what we have done and what we might need to do next time. So we've talked a little bit about how to recruit faculty. We want to do more. We certainly have talked about how to foster interactions and community during the workshop. We haven't talked much at all about food, but we did talk about pampering. You'll have a section in your packet about how to choose resource people. And I really want to make sure we answer any questions you have next time, but I think we're pretty much done with that. How to facilitate small groups. Again, it's in your packet and we'll see if you have any more questions. We haven't talked at all about handling strong resistance. We have not talked about how to do a woods walk if you're in an urban setting. I've said a little bit about the reflection exercise, and I've given you a handout in the packet about it, and I'd like to say a little more. And I haven't talked at all about the learning outcomes exercise yet, so we need to do that. We have talked about the final circle, but we have not talked about the follow-up activities and specifically about deliverables. One of the things I'd like you to do before next time is to look at the Piedmont Project website. You don't have to spend very much time on it, but at the upper right of that website, there is a drop-down box that gives you the statements of all the previous participants. And so you could just look at the kinds of the range, the variability, and anyway, that's the fundamental deliverable. That people have to come up with something that can be put on the website, a statement and a syllabus in order to get their stipend. So we'll talk more about the finances of that and how to keep quality control. It's very important to give faculty a feedback survey and to do a follow-up evaluation. We can talk more about other forms of incentives. Stipends are one way, but it's not the only way. And how you get financing and what administrative needs there are. They're not a lot, but there are some administrative needs. And I've done a rather minimal job today on reviewing the 4 didactic components, but I will try definitely to do that next time. So your packet will have a whole bunch of things like that. But here is what I would like to ask you to do for next time. So read over the leader's packet, which we will give you in a PDF form or Word form, I guess. Bring your questions. Take a look at the Sprawl and Health video. That's 11 minutes, and I've got you here the link. And then if you have, take a moment to look at the participant statements and syllabi. And there is also there a list, some of them with links to Piedmont Project publications. And that may be useful. And I will give some publications to Daita to make sure if you have some questions. I'll also give you a little guidance sheet with some other resources to follow up. So with that, we have come to 4 o'clock. And I am so grateful for your faithful attendance. This has been a wonderful group. And I will be happy to stay here and answer questions offline if anybody has any, but I will look forward to seeing you next week at 2 o'clock Eastern Time. Thank you so much. Goodbye.